Why did it have to be you first? My mother's cold voice sliced through the silence of the living room. Her icy stare was fixed on my abdomen, as if the very life growing inside me was some kind of betrayal. I stood there, stunned, unable to speak. My name is Linda. I'm 25 years. I'm 30 years old and a full-time homemaker. My sister Emily is 3 years older than me and has always been our mother's favorite. For years, I thought that if I tried harder, if I was quieter, kinder, more obedient, maybe she would finally love me too. So when I found out I was pregnant, I allowed myself to hope. Just a little. I thought that giving her the first grandchild might heal the distance between us. I thought maybe this time she'd be proud of me. That day, my husband Ryan and I visited my parents' house. Emily greeted us at the door with her usual warm smile. "Linda, it's been too long," she said as she hugged me tightly. Our father, David, was still at work and would be home later. My mother, Susan, froze when she saw me. Her face was tense, eyes sharp, but the moment she noticed Ryan, she put on a bright, artificial smile. "Oh, I wasn't expecting you to. Let me get something ready," she said, quickly disappearing into the kitchen. She returned with a plate full of sugary cookies. I don't like sweets, she knows that. But when Ryan and I first got engaged, he had mentioned his sweet tooth. Of course she remembered that. With mock concern, she said, "Oh, right, Linda doesn't like sweet things, does she? I forgot. I'm sorry." Her smile never left Ryan. Ryan, ever the gentleman, smiled and replied, "Who I'm eating with matters more than what I'm eating." Mother responded only with a curt, "I see," and sat down on the sofa. When everyone was seated, I took a deep breath. "We came today because we have something important to share," I began. For a split second, my mother's eyes flickered like she already knew but didn't want to hear it. "I'm pregnant." The room fell into heavy silence. Emily was the first to react, jumping up with joy. "Linda, that's wonderful news. Congratulations." But my mother, her face darkened. Her jaw tightened, her eyes turned sharp. Ryan excused himself to take a phone call, and Emily went to the kitchen to make tea. I was left alone with her. And that's when it happened. "Why did it have to be you?" she hissed again, her voice trembling with restrained fury. "The first grandchild should have been Emily's, not yours. Someone like you." Then suddenly, without warning, she kicked me, right in the stomach. The pain exploded through my body. I screamed, "Mom, stop!" Emily's voice rang out from the kitchen. She had returned and saw everything. Ryan came running in. I was curled on the floor, my arms wrapped protectively around my belly, shaking. Emily screamed and called for an ambulance. Ryan knelt beside me, holding me as I trembled. My mother stood calmly, saying, "Why are you all making such a fuss? She just bumped into the cabinet." But Emily's face was pale with fury. "Mom, I saw you! You kicked her!" The sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. As the paramedics arrived and lifted me onto a stretcher, I saw my mother's face one last time. That cold, emotionless stare held 25 years of hatred, concentrated in one glance. Inside the ambulance, Emily held my hand. I could feel her fingers trembling. I looked at her and thought, maybe she had been the only one who saw me all along. Maybe I hadn't truly been alone. Ryan followed behind in the car. Emily kept whispering, "I'm so sorry, Linda. I never knew. I should have seen it." I didn't answer. I just stared out at the streetlights rushing past. I was no longer the helpless girl I once was. Lying there, hands on my belly, I made a silent vow. This ends now. Lying in that sterile hospital bed, my hand resting over the soft swell of my belly, I felt Grace flutter for the first time since the attack. The doctor had told me she was safe, that she was holding on, and so was I. But as the pain in my body began to ease, a deeper pain resurfaced, the kind that had nothing to do with the kick. Memories started flooding back like waves crashing against a broken dam. When did it begin? When did my mother stop looking at me as her daughter and start treating me like an inconvenience? I couldn't remember the exact moment, but I know it was long before I was old enough to understand what was happening. My mother, Susan, used to be the local beauty queen. Even now, she still carried herself like one, always polished, always put together, as if she were still walking a stage. My sister Emily looked just like her. The same golden hair, the same piercing blue eyes. Everywhere we went, people would gush, "You must be Susan's daughter," and my mother would beam with pride. But me? I looked like my father. Brown hair, brown eyes, a shorter frame. No one ever said I looked like Susan, and she never said it either. I remember one Christmas morning when I was 8 and Emily was 11. Under the tree were brightly wrapped gifts. Emily tore open hers to reveal a brand-name dress that was all the rage. Mother clapped her hands in delight. "It's perfect for you, sweetheart. Just like your mother, after all." Then it was my turn. I opened the box and found a pair of plain jeans and a white t-shirt, items that looked like they'd been bought on clearance from a discount store. "These suit you better," my mother said coolly. Even then, I knew what that meant. It wasn't just gifts, it was everything. At the dinner table, Emily would be offered seconds of homemade desserts while I was always warned, "Linda, you should watch your figure. That's enough, don't you think?" The divide only grew deeper as we entered our teenage years. Emily was the captain of the cheerleading team, popular and adored. My mother never missed a single game, camera in hand, cheering loudly from the bleachers. I was a track star. I won races. I brought home medals. But not once did she come to see me run. "I'm busy," she always said, without looking up from whatever she was doing. Sometimes my father David would show up. He'd pat my head and murmur, "Good job, sweetheart," then leave again for work. He never really saw what was happening between my mother and me. It wasn't until high school that I began to understand what was wrong. One day, my best friend Vanessa looked at me after visiting my house and said, "Linda, your mom is cruel." I blinked. "What do you mean?" "She buys designer clothes for Emily, and you get stuff from the clearance rack, and the way she talks to you." Her voice trailed off. "My mom would never treat me like that." That conversation was a turning point. For the first time, I saw my life through someone else's eyes. And it hit me. I wasn't being dramatic. I wasn't imagining things. Emily, of course, had no idea. She genuinely thought I preferred simple clothes. "You've got the kind of figure that looks good in anything," she'd say, offering to lend me her dresses, which never fit. When it was just the two of us, my mother and me, her mask would come off completely. The woman who smiled in front of others turned into someone harsh, bitter, and cold. "To think I had to give birth to someone like you," she'd sneer. "Emily would have been enough. Why can't you be more like her?" Each word cut deep, not because they were new, but because they were so familiar. Every sentence was a chisel, carving away at whatever confidence I had left. I learned to hide my tears. Crying only made things worse. On my 16th birthday, Vanessa and a few friends threw me a surprise party in the school library. They gave me a small makeup kit wrapped in gold paper. It was the only gift I received that year. My mother hadn't even said happy birthday. That tiny gift is still tucked away in my drawer, like a treasure from another life. It was around that time I made a decision. I would leave home the moment I graduated. When I told my mother, she scoffed. "With just a high school diploma, you'll never amount to anything." But instead of breaking me, her words lit a fire inside. Emily was off to college, funded generously from the family's savings. For me, there had never been a college fund, and yet, somehow, the unfairness didn't destroy me. It forged me. I worked part-time at a local diner, studied hard, and saved every dollar. I built quiet plans for a future that no one believed I deserved. Now, lying here, surrounded by hospital walls, I could see it all so clearly. My childhood wasn't just forgotten, it was erased by the very person who should have protected me. But that ends now. I left home the year I turned 18, right after my high school graduation. No farewell party, no hugs. Just my mother, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed, saying, "You'll come crawling back. You're nothing without us." I didn't respond. I just gripped the doorknob, stepped through that cold threshold, and never looked back. Emily was busy with college at the time. She didn't seem too concerned. "You've always been the strong one, Linda," she said with a casual smile. But she didn't know. Leaving wasn't a brave choice. It was my only way out. Mom had dipped into the family savings to pay for Emily's university tuition. She beamed with pride as she told people, "It's worth it for Emily. She'll make our family proud." But me? There had never been a college fund waiting. Nothing set aside for my future. Strangely, the injustice didn't break me, it fueled me. I got a job at a local diner. The pay was low, but it kept me afloat. I rented a tiny studio apartment with peeling wallpaper and noisy pipes. By day, I worked double shifts. By night, I scribbled plans in a notebook. How much to save, where to apply for jobs, what kind of life I could build. I had no college degree, but I had something no one in my family had ever seen in me: willpower. I ate instant noodles almost every day. I wore hand-me-downs from high school. I turned down weekend outings just to put away a few extra dollars. I submitted over 30 job applications to supermarkets, department stores, office clerks. Every time I told them I only had a high school diploma, I saw the interviewer's smile fade. But I didn't give up. And then, it happened. A small tech company had an opening for a customer service position. I walked in, nervous and exhausted. The HR manager looked over my resume, then looked up and said, "We value your drive and work ethic more than a piece of paper. Welcome aboard." And that job changed everything. It was there I met Ryan, a quiet, thoughtful systems engineer who always seemed to be fixing something. Our first conversation happened when I couldn't get the office printer to work. "You're here early every morning," he said. I smiled awkwardly. "I want to learn everything I can. This job, it's a big opportunity for someone like me." After that, he started stopping by my desk occasionally. We shared coffee during breaks. Eventually, we began meeting on weekends. Bit by bit, I told him about my past, about my mother's cruelty, the favoritism, my father's silence. I feared he'd walk away, but Ryan didn't flinch. He held me close and said, "No one has the right to erase who you are. You're not broken. You never were." That was the first time I cried in someone's arms, not from pain, but from the relief of finally being seen. He proposed in the winter of my second year at the company. After the office Christmas party, as we walked through twinkling downtown lights, he knelt on one knee and asked, "Will you marry me?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I whispered through tears. 2 years after leaving home, I returned for the first time to announce our engagement. Mom barely looked at me before saying, "No decent man wants a woman with just a high school education." But when she heard about Ryan's job, an engineer in tech with a solid income, her demeanor flipped instantly. "Oh my, an engineer? Linda, you really got lucky." Her sudden friendliness made my skin crawl. But Ryan smiled politely, unfazed by her shallowness. Emily, though, was genuinely happy. She hugged me tightly. "I'm so glad, Linda. You deserve this." Even Dad, who rarely expressed emotion, said, "He seems like a good young man." Our wedding was small and heartfelt. Friends, Ryan's family, a few coworkers. My mom smiled for the camera, played the part, but as she hugged me at the reception, she leaned in and whispered, "I don't think this will last. You'll be back." But her words didn't hurt anymore. Not this time. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't alone. I had a partner. I had peace. I had a home that I had built. We had been married for almost a year when I found out I was pregnant. I remember it clearly. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Soft sunlight filtered through the curtains, and Ryan was still asleep beside me. When the second line appeared on the test, I placed a hand on my belly and whispered, "Sweetheart, I will protect you, no matter what happens." When I told Ryan, he blinked in shock for a moment, then practically leaped out of bed. He hugged me so tightly I could hardly breathe. "Really? Are you sure?" He laughed, then shouted like a little boy, "I'm going to be a dad!" That very afternoon, he called his parents. They were overjoyed. My mother-in-law arrived at our place within the hour with a stack of pregnancy magazines and catalogs for baby items. "You'll be an amazing mom, Linda," she said, holding my hand. But inside me, something was unsettled. Should I tell my own family? Part of me, the little girl who still longed for her mother's approval, thought, Maybe this time, things will be different. Maybe, just maybe, this child could be the bridge that heals everything. The first grandchild, the hope for reconciliation. Ryan sensed my hesitation. He squeezed my hand and said, "I'll go with you." We called Emily in advance and arranged a visit. She was excited and said Dad would be home early that day. When we arrived, Emily welcomed us with a warm hug. "Linda, you look radiant," she said. Mom was cold at first, but when she saw Ryan, she immediately softened. "Oh, I wasn't expecting visitors. Let me go get something," she said, heading into the kitchen. She returned with a plate of sweet cookies, exactly the kind Ryan liked. When we first announced our engagement, he'd mentioned his love for sweets. Mom remembered that. She turned to him and said with exaggerated politeness, "Oh, that's right. Linda doesn't like sweet things, does she? I forgot. Sorry about that." She didn't even glance at me. Ryan smiled gently and said, "Who I'm eating with matters more than what I'm eating." Mom responded with a short, "I see," and took her seat. When everyone had settled in, I drew a deep breath. "We came today because we have something important to share." Mom's eyes flashed just briefly. "I'm pregnant." A heavy silence fell over the room. Emily jumped up first and hugged me, beaming. "That's amazing news, Linda. Congratulations." But Mom, her face darkened, her lips thinned, her eyes narrowed. Ryan's phone rang. He stepped outside to take the call. Emily went to the kitchen to make tea. And suddenly, I was alone with her. Mom's face changed entirely. "Why did it have to be you?" she spat, her voice shaking with fury. "The first grandchild should have been Emily's, not yours. You're not worthy." Before I could speak, she kicked me, right in the stomach. The pain ripped through me like a knife. I collapsed to the floor, screaming. "Mom, please!" I heard Emily shriek. She had returned from the kitchen and stood frozen in shock. Ryan ran inside moments later and dropped to his knees beside me. I was curled on the floor, arms wrapped protectively around my belly. Emily grabbed her phone and called an ambulance. Ryan held me tightly, his face filled with panic. "You're going to be okay. I've got you." Mom stood there like nothing had happened. She bumped into the cabinet. "Why are you making such a fuss?" she said coldly. But Emily exploded. "Mom, stop lying! I saw it! I saw you kick her!" The sound of sirens approached. I could barely remain conscious. As the paramedics lifted me onto the stretcher, I caught a glimpse of my mother's face. That blank, cold stare held 25 years of contempt. Inside the ambulance, Emily held my hand the entire way. "I'm so sorry, Linda. I never knew," she kept whispering. And at that moment, I realized something I hadn't dared admit until now. I had to cut my mother out of my life. For good. I woke up to the soft beeping of the monitor and the sterile white ceiling above me. My throat was dry, my body aching, but the baby, Grace, was still safe. That was all that mattered. Ryan sat at my bedside, his hand wrapped tightly around mine. Emily had fallen asleep, curled up in the hospital chair beside the window. They had stayed by my side through the night. When the doctor confirmed that I had a small fracture, but that the baby was unharmed, we all breathed a collective sigh of relief. But the peace didn't last long. The door creaked open. My father, David, entered the room, his face drawn and full of worry. And behind him was my mother. There was something fragile in his voice. "Linda, is it true? Emily called us. I didn't want to believe." My mother, always composed, stepped forward and immediately began her act. "Oh, come on," she said smoothly. "Why is everyone making such a fuss? Linda just bumped into the dresser." Emily stood up abruptly, her voice firm. "No, Mom, stop! I saw it! I saw you kick her! Don't lie!" My father froze. The color drained from his face. "It can't be." Then, a voice spoke from the hallway, calm but commanding. "I'm a hospital social worker. May I come in?" A woman in her 40s stepped into the room, a file in her hand and a look of quiet determination in her eyes. She turned to my mother. "Given the circumstances and considering the patient is pregnant, this is a case of domestic violence. That is a serious offense." My mother's face contorted. Suddenly, she began to cry, loudly, dramatically. I'm being painted as a monster! Everyone's ganging up on me! I gave her everything! No one responded. The social worker continued, her tone firm. I can notify the police, but first, I'd like to give the family a chance to talk. Would anyone like to speak? Emily looked at me, eyes shining with tears. Linda, tell them, tell Dad, tell everyone. Ryan gave my hand a squeeze. I nodded, and then I began to speak. Dad, I've been carrying this for so long. I told them everything, about the Christmas presents, how Emily always got something thoughtful and special, while I got whatever was on sale, about how Mom would offer Emily second helpings of dessert and tell me to watch my figure, about the times she would smile like the perfect mother when others were around. But when it was just the two of us, she would say things like, You're a mistake. I never should have had you. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I spoke. She hated me for not looking like her, for being Dad's daughter instead of hers. She treated Emily like gold and me like dirt. My father's hands were trembling. Why didn't you ever tell me? Because she always acted like the perfect mom when you were there, I said. And I thought no one would believe me. Emily covered her face with her hands. I'm sorry, Linda. I really didn't know. I thought you liked simple clothes. I thought Mom just loved me in her way. I never saw it. I shook my head gently. It wasn't your fault. Then my mother snapped. She shot up from her chair and screamed, So it's all my fault now? Just because she's ugly and useless? Emily was beautiful, just like me. That one, she pointed at me, was a burden. For a long moment the room went silent, and then, for the first time in my life, my father raised his voice. Susan, he shouted, you are unfit to be a mother. His words rang through the room like a slap. I won't let you hurt Linda anymore, ever again. The social worker stepped forward. In this situation, I strongly recommend filing for a restraining order and counseling for the entire family. Suddenly, my mother lunged toward me. You ungrateful brat, after everything I did for you! But Ryan and my father held her back. Nurses rushed in. The room descended into chaos. That evening, my father returned to the hospital and sat beside my bed. I'm divorcing your mother, he said quietly. I should have seen it. I should have stopped it. The police launched an investigation. The restraining order was granted. My mother moved in with a distant relative, but continued to send me threatening messages. I'll never forgive you, one of them said. You made me lose everything. But I didn't respond, not anymore. Emily visited me every day during my hospital stay. This time, she said, taking my hand, I'll be watching over you properly. Ryan's parents brought me warm homemade soup and soft blankets. You're our daughter now, my mother-in-law said as she gently tucked the blanket around me. On the day I was discharged, the doctor placed a hand over my belly and smiled. The baby's healthy, strong, just like her mother. We stepped outside into the soft light of spring. Ryan pushed my wheelchair with Emily on one side and my father on the other. And I realized something. This was my family now. I stayed in the hospital for nearly a week for observation, and during that time, I was never once alone. Emily came every morning with a cup of hot tea and a soft scarf she had just learned to knit. I learned from a YouTube video, she smiled. It's not perfect, but you need something warm. Ryan stayed every night, curled in the hospital chair beside my bed, never letting go of my hand. I'm not leaving you, Linda. Not even at your weakest, he whispered, and I believed him. He wasn't just my husband, he was my safe haven. My father, David, who had once been so distant, now became the most attentive presence of all. He brought warm soup from my mother-in-law, books about pregnancy, even asked the nurses how he could help. One afternoon, he sat beside me, looking out the window, and said softly, I failed you, Linda, but if you'll let me, I want to be a real father starting now. I held his hand. I still need a dad, and now I finally have one. Meanwhile, Susan, my mother, was under a restraining order. She had left the state to live with distant relatives, but still managed to send me one final voicemail. I'll never forgive you. You ruined everything. I listened once, then I deleted it. I wasn't angry. I wasn't afraid. I simply had nothing left to say. When I was discharged, Ryan pushed my wheelchair into the gentle spring sunlight. Emily walked on one side, my father on the other. For the first time in my life, I felt the warmth of family, not just in blood, but in love. At home, my mother-in-law had prepared a welcome meal. She hugged me gently. You and the baby are part of us now, no matter what. In the following weeks, I was surrounded by love. My father visited every weekend, bringing fruit and children's books. Emily moved into a nearby apartment so she could help with meals and check in daily. Ryan took extended leave from work to be with me at every doctor's appointment, through every cramp and every worry. One evening, we all gathered around the dinner table: Ryan, Emily, my father, and both of Ryan's parents. It was a simple meal. No big speeches, no forced pleasantries, just quiet laughter, homemade soup, and the kind of comfort I never thought I'd know. I started attending a support group for mothers healing from toxic families. The first time I shared my story, I cried. But I wasn't alone. The women around me had their own scars, their own stories of rejection and survival. One woman said to me, "Linda, the fact that you survived means your child won't have to." She was right. One day, during a group session, I placed my hands over my belly and whispered to Grace, "You'll never feel what I felt. You'll never wonder if you're loved. You'll never be ashamed of who you are." On the day Grace turned 6 months in the womb, we held a small celebration. Nothing fancy, just close family and a few friends. There was laughter, warm hugs, and soft music playing in the background. Ryan leaned close and whispered, "Are you happy, Linda?" I looked around, the light from the window casting a golden glow over Emily and my father, who were laughing at something silly, my in-laws chatting in the kitchen, and Grace gently kicking inside me as if joining in the joy. I leaned into him and whispered back, "I've never been happier." And I meant it. "Linda, just one more push." The doctor's voice echoed through the delivery room. I clenched Ryan's hand so tightly I could barely feel my own fingers. Emily was behind me, rubbing my back, tears streaming down her face. "Come on, you've got this," she cried. After 16 hours of labor, of exhaustion, pain, and silent prayers, our baby was finally about to arrive. "I see the head," the nurse said, and then a strong, piercing cry. "It's a girl! She's perfectly healthy!" Tears welled up in my eyes as the nurse gently placed the baby on my chest. I looked down at her tiny red face, her clenched fists, her trembling breath. "Grace," I whispered, the name Ryan and I had chosen. My father was the first to see her in the waiting room. His voice cracked as he said, "She looks just like you did the day you were born." It's been 3 months since that moment. The last message I ever received from my mother was a voice memo she sent while I was still recovering in the hospital. "I'll never forgive you. You made me lose everything." I heard she moved to another state after that, and honestly, I don't think I'll ever see her again. Still, there are nights when I wake up, holding Grace to my chest, and I think of her. Not with hatred, not with rage, but as a woman who somehow lost her way, who forgot how to love. One afternoon, Emily brought Grace to me from her crib. "Linda," she smiled, "Grace has your eyes." Indeed, her deep brown eyes mirrored mine. But her smile? That was all Ryan. Emily moved into a nearby apartment and visits nearly every day. She holds Grace as if she's holding hope itself. There's no pretense in her affection anymore. No shadows. Only light. My father decided to take early retirement. His reason? "I want to watch my granddaughter grow up." Every weekend, he comes over just to hold her, read her picture books, hum lullabies he hasn't sung in decades. One day, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and said, "You've done so well. You've become a wonderful mother." Those words I'd longed to hear my whole life. Words that healed wounds I didn't even know were still open. Ryan's parents treat Grace as if she were their own firstborn. My mother-in-law knit tiny handmade sweaters and socks embroidered with hearts. You and Grace, she told me, are precious to us. You always will be. Motherhood isn't easy. There are sleepless nights, days when Grace's fever won't break, hours when she cries and nothing works. But in those moments, I'm not alone. There's always someone to call, someone to hold her while I shower, someone to say, "You're doing great." And most of all, there's Grace, this little miracle that makes it all worth it. I've continued attending the support group. I've shared my full story now, not with tears, but with strength, a strength that grows every time I look into my daughter's eyes. When Grace turned 6 months old, we held a quiet celebration. Emily, my father, Ryan's parents, and our closest friends gathered in our home. Soft music played, laughter filled the air. Ryan leaned close and whispered, "Are you happy, Linda?" I looked around, at my sister chatting with my dad, at my in-laws snapping photos of Grace in her little birthday dress. The golden glow of sunset lit the room. Grace was sleeping peacefully in my arms. I smiled. Very. And in that moment, I knew no darkness will ever touch this child. I will not repeat my mother's mistakes. I will give Grace a life full of love, of safety, of belonging. As I made that silent vow, Grace reached out her tiny hand toward me, her fingers barely brushing my chin. It felt like she was saying, "It's okay, Mom. We've got this." Outside the window, the trees swayed gently in the spring breeze. A new day was beginning, and maybe this is where our real story starts.